What up guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're going to check out and install my new LED headlight kit on an 02 to 09 Kawasaki KLX 110. 02 to 09, that's correct. So no charging system, no electric start, no battery of any kind on the bike, and we're not gonna add one either. This kit installs super easy, less than 5 minutes, and everything works as it should. Check it out. So the 02 to 09 Kawasaki KLX 110 did not come with a charging system. It didn't have electric start, that wasn't really a thing back then, and there was no need for a battery on the bikes. But fortunately for us, the Japanese spec bikes, which used a very similar engine to this one, they were street legal, and they required a halogen headlight. Therefore, Kawasaki wired all of these engines with a pre-wound lighting coil on the factory stators. So if you look at the wiring harness that comes out of the crankcase or the flywheel cover here, there's going to be a couple wires. I believe there's 3 total wires, and one of them is yellow. Now that yellow wire supplies AC current. That's very important. It's not exactly what we need, but it's great that it's there because we don't have to pull this cover off. We don't have to install a lighting coil that's aftermarket. It's already all there for us, and it's ready to go. First, let's check out the headlight kit, and I'll show you everything that's included. Now, once you get everything unpacked, your table should look something like this. We got our light bar here. It's a dual row, super bright. It's got black powder coated brackets, stainless steel hardware all throughout, and 7/8 clamps. Now, these clamps will work with the majority of bars in the market. Pro Taper, Renthal, Mika Metals, Tag, you name it, they'll fit. If you want to run it with stock bars, you got a son or a daughter who's small and still running the factory bars, you can pull this spacer out right here, run a shorter bolt right here, and it'll hook right up. This is our connector. This is a male connector. It's waterproof, and it plugs right into the harness. Next, we have our rectifier. This rectifier comes pre-wired, ready to go, waterproof connector as always, and a custom mounting bracket that hides it completely out of sight. Moving on to our wiring harness. This is definitely the most complicated part of this kit, but I did everything that I could to make it extremely easy for you to install. You only have to plug in 2 connectors here and here and connect 2 wires here and over here. Now to walk you through each thing, we've got our on-off switch here, simple operation just like normal. We've got our headlight plug. This is the female side. This will plug directly into the light that you see here. We have an inline fuse on the power wire to protect the circuit. We have our 4-pin connector that goes to our rectifier. This is, of course, waterproof, as is everything else in this harness. And then we have our ground wire. This will go to a chassis ground. And then we have our power lead. This is going to be AC power in from the factory lighting coil. Lastly, we got a couple zip ties and an inline wire tap. Now this wire tap is not necessary, but it is going to be included with your kit, and I think it's the best way to connect the power wire to the existing system. If you choose not to use it, I will show you one other way to do so. That's up to you. As far as which tools are going to be required, I got an 8mm socket. This one's on an impact. You can use a socket wrench. I've got an open-end 8mm. This is going to be used to loosen and tighten the 8mm bolt that holds down our ground wire. I've got a Phillips head screwdriver. This is going to be to take out the screws and put them back in for our on-off switch. I've got a pair of needle nose pliers. This is going to be to squeeze the inline wire tap. And then I've got some wire strippers. Doesn't matter which one you have, either one works. We got to strip one wire just a little bit, and these will help us do that. Let's go get it installed. To get started, we first got to remove the single 8mm headed bolt from the center of the top of the number plate. Your plate will most likely just fall right off, but there is a small pin that locates it in the bottom clamp, and make sure your brake cable doesn't get caught on the plate itself. Next, we're going to install the rectifier. Now we're going to use the exact same mounting hole from the bolt that we just removed that held the number plate in. And we're just going to snug this up because in the very end, we're going to pull it back out and sandwich this rectifier mounting bracket between our number plate and our top clamp. We just want to put it in place for now so we can plug our wiring harness in and not have this falling all over the place or scratching the front fender. I'm going to run this bolt in by hand and then snug it in with my impact, leaving it loose so that I can easily take it back out when it's time for the final assembly. Now that we have the rectifier in place, we can install our wiring harness. Let's start with the switch. Facing it like this, turn it to the side and remove the lower Phillips head screw. Loosen the top one so that we have some flexibility in the clamp so we can wrap it around the bars easily. The harness length is pre-decided so that you can mount the switch on the lower portion of the bars. You can go on the side, on the center, any of those options should work. The reason I don't run them up top is, for one, I think it's a lot cleaner, and 2, I don't want anyone to accidentally mistake this as an engine kill switch in the event that the throttle sticks. Now that we have the harness hanging, we can start to plug things in. First, take the 4-pin connector and plug it into the side of the rectifier. Now this is very much side specific, so if it feels like it's not going to go, don't force it, just flip it over. Make sure your pins are straight inside here and plug it in. The two will lock together, making it hard to pull apart, and it'll be held in place. You've got your inline fuse here and your headlight plug there. Now we haven't put the headlight on yet, so we're gonna leave that for last, but just know that that's what that's for, and you're not gonna need it until then, so we can essentially push it out of the way for now. This wire here is our ground wire. This is gonna go to our chassis ground right inside the left side of the bike here, and this is our AC power in lead wire. We're gonna run this over to the flywheel cover. For now, stick it through the side of the fork leg here and pull the slack out. With the power and ground leads pushed through the fork leg, you can start to see a little bit of how this is gonna look when it's all said and done. We got a rectifier here, our connector sits there, our headlight plug goes up here to our headlight that's not yet installed, our inline fuse sits behind it, right in this area. We're gonna use a zip tie to secure this here shortly, and the rest goes to the back. So for the next step, we're gonna turn the bars to the side, exposing this 8mm headed bolt right here. This airbox bolt is gonna be the new ground for our harness. I've already loosened mine, but back yours off just enough so that you can slide this fork terminal underneath the bolt, but between the washer. Once you get it in position, snug it up with your hand, and then tighten it the rest of the way with your open end. You don't need to crank on this one, just get it nice and snug and make sure there's not a ton of force on it so we don't damage our harness. Now we can run our yellow power lead back to the back of the bike. We're almost done. For this next step, I'm gonna pull off this left side shroud. With the tank shroud removed, we can run the wire over the airbox, underneath the fuel tank, much along the same route as this OEM harness, and then down and above the choke. Now if you got an aftermarket carb or something different, you're not gonna have this choke probably, but for stock style bikes or stock-ish bikes, run it up over that choke, up over that fuel petcock, then let it come right back down here where the AC power lives. And now we're almost done. We can make our final connection. This is the AC power out from the flywheel, coming up out of this case, this little black harness right here. And we got 3 wires of this plug. You got a blue wire, a yellow wire in the middle, and a white wire. The yellow wire is the only one that we care about. It's in the dead center, so no matter which way you're looking at the plug, it's still the same wire. We're gonna take our yellow wire from our harness, and we're gonna connect it with the yellow wire in this plug. Now there's 2 different ways to do this. I'm not gonna tap into this wire on this bike specifically because it's about to be for sale and there's no point in messing with this harness when I'm gonna take the light off anyway. But if you wanna install it more permanently, I highly recommend using a wire tap anywhere on this wire between here and the bottom. Preferably somewhere up a little higher where you can tuck it out of the way. Wire taps aren't that permanent either, but the owner of this bike specifically asked me not to do a wire tap, so that's the reason for that. The other option, and it does work almost as well, surprisingly enough, is that you can strip back a little bit of this wire, slide it inside this connector here, and run a zip tie around it to hold it in place. Doesn't sound like it would work. I thought it would vibrate out, but believe it or not, it'll actually last quite a while. I haven't had any problems doing that. So for the sake of this, I'm just gonna strip this back and plug it in, and I'm gonna show you how to use your wire tap in the event that you want a more permanent and strong connection. Take my wire here, I'm gonna strip back just a little bit of it. See, I have a small amount stripped. I'm gonna twist this so that it doesn't fray apart everywhere. I'm gonna take my OEM connector here, I know it's a little dark now, and I'm gonna slide this up inside the connector. So I'm gonna make sure that it's not pushing it or stopping. It's making contact with the pins. Once that wire is in place, I'm gonna run a zip tie around it to hold it in position. Again, this is not the way I recommend to do it for most people, especially you got a lot of vibration, you're riding trails, but for this instance, we don't wanna use a wire tap. Now for the wire tap. We've got 2 barrels here. This outside barrel, or farthest from this little clip right here, this is for your original wire to pass through. You can see it goes the whole length. The wire can sit right inside that channel. The other side is blocked off on one end so that you can feed a wire into it, and then you can clamp this little silver piece down and it'll make contact through both wires, causing the circuit to split, and then you can essentially tap into that wire. Now if I was gonna do it on this wire here, and this would be your OEM wire, okay? You would take this outside piece and you would slide it over this wire. You can see the wire sits in there, it's going straight through it. It's gonna make a good solid connection when I squeeze this down. And now I've got my other side that I need to input. Now this is important to remember direction. These taps are directional in a sense of, if this is our headlight lead and our gas tank is sitting somewhere up here, we wanna come in like this so that our harness doesn't have to make a 180. If I had this coming in from the other side, then I'd have to loop my harness and come up, and it just wouldn't look as clean. So keep that in mind when you're running this tap. You set your other wire in here, in this case it's our headlight harness wire. Make sure it's bottoming out. You'll feel it stop inside this connector. Run it all the way in and then pinch your finger like this so that it can't move. be sure to check that your original wire has not popped out like that or somehow is sitting sideways from where it was before. Make sure it's still sitting nice and straight inside the tap. Both of our wires are in position. The white wire or the harness wire is all the way down in place. We're gonna take our needle nose pliers here, run it across the bottom, grab our little silver tap piece, and slowly squeeze it until it goes all the way in and connects both wires. You don't have to get crazy with it, doesn't take a ton of force, and now we have a nice solid connection between the two. Once that's down, you'll notice that this is open and exposed. If that was to hit the frame, it could ground out when the bike is running. You're gonna take this piece and slide it over the top of it, and it will clip into place. Now we have a good solid tap. This wire is not gonna come out. Always be sure to pull test these and make sure you can't yank them out. And this wire is obviously still continuous, so we don't have any problems there. You'll then push this wire up out of the way, zip tie it if you need to, and you're ready to go. Now the only thing left to do is install the light bar. So I went ahead and pulled my clamp ends off, they're 8mm bolts, pull those out, and then loosen these stainless Allen head bolts that go through into the clamps. Don't take them all the way out, just loosen them enough that you have some flexibility. I'd love to tell you what size Allen head this is. It's probably a 5 or a 6, but it's constantly changing based on hardware availability, so I can't make any promises. I can promise it's gonna be metric, that's a guarantee. Once you get those loose, play with the position on the bars and see what fits best or what lines up best given the bar rise that you have. Different bar heights will change the way these sit, and keep in mind these are offset, so they're not exactly dead even. If you have it sitting like this, it's gonna be different than if it's sitting like that. And the change is mostly gonna be whether or not you put your bolts in from this side or you put them in from this side. It doesn't matter, both are doable. It's all just gonna be based on which bars you're running. I'm gonna take this with the fins facing up. I prefer it that way, although it doesn't have to go that way. You won't have any issues running it upside down. And I'm gonna set this on here and see which looks best. Now looking at it from the top, it looks to me like these are gonna have to come from the outside like this, or the less wide preference, which is typical of a bar that's a lower height. These are KLX rise bars, so they're not gonna be as tall as like a CRF or XR50 rise bar. Now that I got my bar roughly in place, I'm gonna grab the back sides of these clamps, I'm gonna put them in on this side, put them in on this side, and snug them up, and then I can position my bar up and down, left and right, and make sure it's even on the bars. Now I've just got my clamps hand tight. I'm gonna grab my wrench and just slowly snug them up. These do not need to be cranked on. You can see that there's a small gap on either side. If you crank on that really hard, it's gonna stress the piece and there is a chance that you'll crack it. It's not a wheel. It's not something that needs to be crazy torqued down, so please be cautious when you tighten this. I've had people break them from really cranking on them with super long wrenches or with impacts. I'm gonna tighten it by hand. That's all you need to do. Just wanna make sure that it's nice and level with my bar pad. Sit back, you can see it's tilted to one side. So I'm gonna pull it up like that, push this side back down, and if you look at it from the top, everything looks pretty good. Pretty happy with that. So I'm gonna tighten these up, plug in the headlight, and then we can fire it up and make sure it works. Now we've got our light bar in place, but we still need to plug it in, and then we need to put a zip tie around these components here to keep them nice and compact behind our number plate. This is polarity specific, so it does need to go in the proper way, and there is a clip and a stop on it that won't allow you to plug it in backwards. Much like this connector, if it feels like it's not going in, take it out, flip it 180, and push things in. I'm gonna take a zip tie and run it behind all three things, and just gently pull it all together to keep things nice and organized. I'm gonna trim off the end of my zip tie, and then we can go do a little quick test, come back, pull this bolt out, put our number plate on, and we're done. Now because we don't have a battery, this light's not gonna work until the bike is running, and it is gonna flicker a little bit when the RPM is low. So if you run a high idle RPM, you won't notice as much flicker, but if you don't, it is gonna flicker some until you give it some throttle. Now once you get to about 1900-ish RPMs, maybe a little bit sooner than that, everything levels out and it works just like it would on a bike that has a battery. So it works great. Let's go for a little ride in the dark and I'll show you what the output looks like. It's a very dark night, perfect for testing. I want to make note that this looks much more flickery on camera. It's because LED lights and cameras do not work well together. Most of you probably know that, but I promise you that when it's at full throttle, it doesn't flicker. I'm only doing this to give you an example of how much light output there is, not to cause you to not buy it because you think it flickers so poorly. The flicker that you're seeing now is almost impossible to see with the human eye. So let's do a little cruise around the block and I'll show you how bright it is. Now this is idle, we're low RPM, the bike is warmed up now. Let's go for a little cruise. You can see the light's super bright. Not a ton of street lights around here to help me out. So there you have it. Pretty sick, and we don't need a battery to do it. I'm super stoked about this kit, and I hope you guys are too. We got one thing left to do. Let's throw the number plate on, and that's a wrap. So when you go to put the front number plate back on, all you gotta do is back out the bolt that's in that rectifier. Let it chill for a second. It's fine if it hangs. It's not gonna hurt anything. Take the bolt and put it back through the front number plate, sticking out the backside like so. Take your rectifier, slide the bracket over. You can see the way it's set up. It's very close to the plate, but it doesn't touch. It's not gonna damage anything. It's not gonna bend any of your plastic or anything like that. Now we're gonna take it right back down. Make sure none of our wiring is sticking out where it's gonna be in the way. Line up the lower number plate in its pin spot. Line our bolt back up and run it right back in. Nice and tight, and no one even knows it's in there. Number plate's on, shroud cover's not on. If you want to throw that on now, go ahead and do so. There's one last thing I want to talk about with this kit. If you are running extended fork legs, i.e. dampening rods and springs, a tall top clamp, and tall bars with a stock front brake cable, you're playing with fire. You can get away with it. A lot of guys seem to do it nowadays. I never did, I just bought a cable. But if you are running a stock brake cable or a short one, you need to be very careful that it can't get caught on this side of your headlight here. Now you can run spacers. Sometimes I include them for different models, but you need to be wary of where this cable is, because if you were to compress this suspension all the way and this cable was to come up as the fork legs compress and got stuck around this edge here, and then as they decompress, let's say you land a jump and then you riding away, the fork legs come back out and this cable gets stuck and sends you this direction right over the handlebars because your front brake's just locked up. So please be cautious. I recommend that everyone running a light kit, regardless of what suspension they have, run an extended brake cable. So please be conscious of where your brake cable is and the kind of routing or length or room that you have left after your light sits in place. Otherwise, I hope you guys are stoked. I'm really pumped to finally offer this kit. It's been in the works for a very long time. And although I know it looks basic, all the complicated stuff is done and taken out so you guys don't have to worry about it. You hook up 4 things, you're ready to party, you can ride all night long. If you guys are interested in running this kit, please contact me at evolvedcomponents@gmail.com. That's EVOLVEDCOMPONENTS@gmail.com, or on Instagram at _Alex Schuler. That's _ALEXSCHULER. Hit me up. I'm happy to help, always happy to answer questions, and I'd love to set you up with one of these lights. Thanks for watching. Peace out.